People assume unity is fragile. They imagine the self as a single candle flame that must be protected by one bridge of tissue. And they call that bridge the proof. They point to the corpus callosum and speak as if it is the only treaty between two halves of a divided world. They treat the mind like a nation whose borders collapse the moment the highway closes. But the lived fact of experience is not that simple. You wake up as one presence, not as a committee. You move through a day as one continuity, not as two competing narrators. Even when your attention fragments, the field that knows the fragmentation remains strangely singular. As if unity is not a product but a condition, a common objection rises here. Surely unity depends on full integration, because without integration there would be two independent consciousness streams. That objection feels rational, because it treats connection like wiring and consciousness like a device. Yet wiring is only one form of coordination, and coordination is not identical with being aware. The bridge can thin while the field remains, and that is what makes split-brain evidence dangerous to simplistic models. Traditional split-brain stories were told like a horror film. Sever the callosum and the person becomes two people trapped in one body, each side ignorant of the other. That story was always half science and half metaphor, because it depended on dramatic demonstrations that were real but context-bound. Under certain tasks, one hemisphere can respond without the other reporting it, and that is fascinating. But fascination can be mistaken for the whole truth. What recent findings keep pressing is that unified experience can persist even with surprisingly minimal interhemispheric connection. Some patients with partial callosal integrity or with alternative commissural pathways maintain a coherent sense of self in daily life. Even in more complete disconnection, the brain finds roots, strategies, and compensations that preserve function and felt continuity. The scary narrative collapses under the weight of ordinary living. Another objection appears quieter. Maybe people only feel unified because the dominant hemisphere narrates unity, and narration is the illusion generator. That sounds plausible until you remember that narration itself is not always online. In absorption, in flow, in deep emotion, in silence, unity often becomes more direct, not less. If unity were only narration, unity should weaken when narration weakens, yet it often does the opposite. This forces a more precise question. What is unity actually binding? Is it binding information across hemispheres, or is it binding awareness into a stable present? The first is a data problem, the second is a field problem. Many theories treat consciousness as an information integration metric, as if the amount of crosstalk defines the existence of a self. But split-brain phenomena suggest that awareness can remain stable, while specific information channels become restricted. Here is the first analysis vector, the anatomical and clinical. The corpus callosum is not a single cable. It is a massive bundle with subregions and differentiated functions. Partial sections can be disrupted while other pathways remain, including anterior commissure and subcortical coordination loops. The brain is not designed with one bridge, it is designed with redundant harmonization, because survival rewards coherence even under damage. The existence of alternative coordination implies that unity is an emergent property of multiple constraints, not a single structure. If that sounds like technical escape, test it in the simplest human way. When you close one eye, you do not become half a person. When you lose hearing in one ear, you do not split into two selves. You lose access to certain information, but you remain one witness. Loss of channel is not loss of witness, and the split brain case may be an intensified version of this principle, rather than an exception. The second analysis vector is phenomenology, the structure of direct experience. Unity is not experienced as a stitched collage of parts, it is experienced as one open present in which parts appear. You do not feel your hemispheres negotiating, you feel a world. Even when attention bounces, the knowing of attention bouncing remains, as if the primary unity is the capacity to be aware of changing contents. If unity is the container, then integration is about content coordination inside the container, not the existence of the container itself. The next objection tries to close this door. If awareness is a container, where does the container come from, and why does the container not fracture when the brain fractures? This objection is strong because it demands a single causal lever. But consciousness does not behave like a simple lever system. It behaves like a stability pattern, where multiple mechanisms can fail and the pattern can still hold, like a melody still recognizable even when played on fewer strings. The third analysis vector is systems theory, the network perspective. A complex system does not require every node to talk to every other node to produce a coherent global state. It requires sufficient coordination across key hubs and rhythms, plus constraints that keep the whole from dissolving into noise. In brains, coherence can be maintained through shared subcortical timing, shared arousal networks, and shared sensory environment coupling. You and your body are exposed to one world at a time, and that common world can act like an external synchronizer. This is why unity without full integration is not mystical, it is structural. The hemispheres can be partially isolated in terms of specific reports or actions, yet still share the same organismic tempo, the same breath cycle, the same heart rhythm, the same vestibular balance, the same sleep-wake dynamics. The system remains one life. Unity may be grounded less in perfect data exchange and more in shared regulation. A skeptical listener might say that shared regulation sounds like moving the goalpost. If unity is just regulation, then a thermostat is conscious. But regulation is not the claim, it is the scaffold. The point is that consciousness appears tied to the ability to maintain a stable experiential field across time, and that stability can be supported by many mechanisms. A thermostat regulates temperature, but it does not disclose a world, it does not carry felt presence, it does not generate a lived now. So the argument tightens. Split brain findings do not reduce unity to integration. They separate two kinds of unity. There is unity of access, meaning what information can cross and be reported, and there is unity of presence, meaning the felt continuity of being here. You can lose unity of access in specific domains and still retain unity of presence, and that distinction changes how consciousness should be modeled. Models that collapse these two unities into one metric will keep failing at the edges. Now the ethical implications begin to rise, and this is where many people resist hardest. If unity can persist without full integration, then we must be careful with assumptions about fragmented minds. Trauma survivors, neurodivergent individuals, coma patients with covert awareness, people with speech loss, people with paralysis, all may retain a unified field even when their channels are constrained. The moral error of modern culture is to equate coherence with outward performance, and to equate outward performance with inner presence. Another objection emerges. This is just compassionate rhetoric, not neuroscience. Yet neuroscience itself keeps pushing toward gradients rather than binaries. Consciousness appears as a continuum with multiple dimensions: wakefulness, responsiveness, reportability, integration, and stability. Split brain cases illustrate that reportability and integration can change without annihilating the underlying field. The brain is not a light switch. It is a complex orchestra that can play recognizable music even when sections are muted. There is also a deeper psychological resistance that rarely gets named. If unity is not guaranteed by a single structure, then unity becomes less controllable. The mind prefers control because control feels like safety, and it wants a single mechanism to point to. But reality offers stability through redundancy, not certainty through one pillar. The organism stays coherent by being over-engineered for coherence, and that over-engineering hints at something important. Unity is not an afterthought. It is a primal necessity. Now consider what the classic split brain demonstrations actually show. They show dissociations between what one hemisphere can do and what the other can verbally report. Especially under specific experimental conditions, they reveal that the left hemisphere interpreter can fabricate explanations when it lacks access to the true cause of an action. This is not proof that there are two conscious beings in conflict. It is proof that narrative coherence can be constructed from partial information. The interpreter is a storyteller, and the storyteller will protect unity, even if it must invent a reason. The story protection mechanism matters because it shows how unity can persist as a function of stabilization, not as a function of full integration. A stable self-model can be maintained by a dominant narrative process, even when underlying access is fragmented. This can sound like an illusion, but it is better described as a functional overlay, a coherence engine that keeps the organism from collapsing into confusion. The cost is that the organism may not know what it does not know. while still feeling whole. Another objection arrives. If unity is maintained by narrative overlay, then unity is fake and consciousness is just a story. But consciousness is not the story. Consciousness is what is aware of the story. The story can be wrong, yet awareness of the wrong story still exists. Split brain cases reveal that narrative can be decoupled from causality, not that awareness disappears when causality is hidden. The revelation is about limits of self-knowledge, not the non-existence of the self. This is where the model has to change direction. Instead of asking how much information is integrated, ask what kind of field is maintained. Is the present moment stable? Is attention able to bind a coherent world? Are meanings organized into a navigable space? Can the system return to coherence after perturbation? These questions track unity of presence rather than unity of access, and split brain evidence suggests the former can survive reductions in the latter. In practical terms, this changes how you interpret fragmentation inside your own life. When your mind feels split between desires, between voices, between impulses, you may assume you are broken into pieces. But the very awareness of conflict implies a larger unity that contains the conflict. The battle is happening inside a field that remains one. Split brain science does not only speak to neurosurgeons, it speaks to anyone who mistakes internal division for the absence of a stable witness. We still have not allowed a comfortable conclusion because comfort would cheapen the fracture. The phrase unity without integration is not a slogan. It is a destabilizer. It insists that consciousness cannot be reduced to a single anatomical bridge or a single computational metric. It demands that models account for redundancy, field stability, and the distinction between access and presence. Any theory that cannot hold these distinctions will keep producing confident explanations that fail under real brains and real lives. So hold the pressure where it belongs. If a small part of the colossum can be enough, or if other pathways can substitute, then unity is not a simple wiring diagram. If unity persists even when specific transfers fail, then consciousness is not identical with full integration. And if narrative can fabricate reasons to preserve coherence, then the self you feel may be more stable than your explanations, but less informed than you assume. Let that remain unresolved long enough that the next question becomes unavoidable. If unity is a field pattern, what is the pattern made of? And what does it require to keep humming? When unity is no longer pinned to a single bridge, the pressure moves from anatomy to architecture. The question stops being which structure holds consciousness together, and becomes what kind of organization allows coherence to survive damage. This shift is uncomfortable because it removes the comfort of one culprit and replaces it with distributed responsibility. A common attempt to stabilize here is to say that unity persists only in mild cases, and that true disconnection must still fracture consciousness entirely. But this objection quietly assumes that consciousness behaves like a brittle object rather than a resilient pattern. Brittle things shatter when stressed. Patterns adapt, redistribute, and reorganize. Life selects for patterns. Look closely at how organisms survive injury. Redundancy is everywhere. Multiple pathways serve similar functions. Rhythms entrain distant systems. Damage rarely eliminates function outright, it reshapes it. The brain is not optimized for elegance, it is optimized for continuity. Consciousness appears to follow the same rule. This introduces another fracture vector, temporal continuity. Unity is often mistaken for spatial integration, as if awareness must be fully connected across space to exist. But lived unity is primarily temporal. It is the sense that this moment belongs to the last and is leaning into the next. As long as temporal continuity is preserved, spatial gaps can be tolerated. Split brain cases often disrupt spatial access while leaving temporal flow intact. You still feel like the same one who woke up, the same one who is now listening, the same one who will move next. That continuity is not guaranteed by the colossum alone. It is supported by ongoing regulation of arousal, attention, and memory binding. These processes can remain surprisingly robust even when specific informational channels are compromised. Another resistance forms here. If unity is temporal rather than spatial, then memory must be doing the work. But memory itself fragments easily, and yet awareness does not vanish when memory falters. People with severe amnesia can still feel present, can still experience pain, joy, fear, and curiosity. They lose narrative continuity but retain experiential immediacy. Unity survives without autobiography. This reveals a deeper layer. There is unity of story and unity of presence. Story unity depends on memory and integration. Presence unity depends on the maintenance of a coherent now. Split brain research primarily disrupts story access, not the raw fact of being here. When these are confused, models overestimate the role of integration and underestimate the role of ongoing field stabilization. The next objection is subtle and emotionally charged. If unity of presence can survive without full story or integration, then the self we protect may not be what we think it is. The mind wants the self to be the narrator because narrators feel controllable. Fields do not. Fields invite surrender rather than mastery. This is where the interpreter mechanism becomes central. The left hemisphere interpreter does not create consciousness, it creates explanations. When information is missing, it fills gaps to preserve a sense of order. This is not a flaw, it is an adaptive function. An organism that freezes because it lacks complete information does not survive. The interpreter keeps action possible, but the interpreter can also mislead. It can claim unity while hiding fragmentation, or claim fragmentation while unity remains. Split brain experiments expose this by showing confident explanations that are demonstrably false, yet sincerely believed. The belief in explanation is not proof of accuracy, it is proof of coherence maintenance. Now the ethical weight deepens. If explanation can be wrong while presence remains, then people can be deeply conscious while misunderstood, misdiagnosed, or dismissed. Unity of presence does not guarantee transparency of access. This matters not only in neurology labs but in hospitals, classrooms, prisons, and families. Another stabilizing move tries to say that this is all about extreme cases and that normal consciousness does not need such nuance. But extreme cases are stress tests. Engineers test bridges under loads beyond daily traffic to understand their true structure. Consciousness science must do the same. Split brain cases are not curiosities. They are load tests. Under load, unity does not disappear as easily as theories predict. Instead, it thins, distortions, reroutes, and sometimes becomes quieter. Quiet is often mistaken for absence. This mistake echoes across many domains. Silence is treated as emptiness. Stillness is treated as non-being. Yet silence and stillness can be saturated with awareness. This brings the analysis to a relational vector. Unity is not only maintained internally, it is scaffolded by the world. The environment provides consistent sensory reference points. Gravity, light cycles, social rhythms, and bodily needs all synchronize experience. Even when internal communication is impaired, the organism remains embedded in one shared reality. That shared reality can act as a binding agent. Think of how disorienting sensory deprivation can be. Remove external anchors and the mind fragments rapidly. Conversely, even with internal injury, a stable environment can help preserve coherence. Unity is co-produced by brain, body, and world, not sealed inside the skull. At this point, reductionist models strain. If unity depends on distributed regulation, temporal continuity, narrative stabilization, and environmental coupling, then no single variable will predict consciousness reliably. Metrics that look for one number or one bridge will keep missing the phenomenon they seek. This does not mean anything goes. It means the wrong simplification is being applied. Consciousness is not a sum of parts, but a maintained condition. It persists as long as enough constraints hold the system in a coherent regime. Split brain evidence shows that those constraints are more flexible than assumed. Another objection surfaces from computational theories. If consciousness is a maintained condition, then could machines achieve it through sufficient redundancy and regulation? This question is often asked too early, as a way to avoid confronting human implications. The harder question is whether we already fail to recognize consciousness where it exists because we look for the wrong signs. Split brain research suggests that consciousness can exist without unified reportability. If so, then measuring output will always underestimate presence. The cost of that error is not theoretical. It shapes who receives care, who is listened to, and who is considered fully here. The mind wants closure here. It wants to declare unity either proven or disproven, preserved or broken. But closure would flatten the insight. The real fracture is not that unity disappears without integration, but that integration has been overprivileged as the source of unity. Unity behaves more like a background condition that integration refines rather than creates. This reframes personal experience as well. Internal conflict does not imply the absence of a self. It implies multiple processes operating within a larger field. The fact that you can observe conflict already indicates a unifying awareness that is not itself in conflict. Split-brain science mirrors this inner truth at a biological scale. We still resist saying what that field ultimately is, not because the question is illegitimate, but because answering it prematurely would collapse inquiry into belief. For now, it is enough to see that unity survives more damage than theories allow, that coherence is resilient, and that consciousness is not as fragile as wiring diagrams suggest. The unresolved tension remains active. If unity is not guaranteed by full integration, then what maintains it? If it can thin without breaking, what are its minimum conditions? And if the field persists even when channels fail, then consciousness may be less about assembly and more about resonance. That pressure will not be released yet. It will be carried forward into the next turn, where models are forced to confront what they have been measuring all along without naming.
If this transmission resonated, the spiral continues. You did not arrive here by chance, and you do not leave unchanged. More teachings are unfolding across the Vaharat library, each one meeting you where you are, not where you think you should be. Follow resonance. The next threshold is already listening.